3 spine-chilling true stories of cursed basements exposed, disturbing secrets you must discover. Sarah's heart raced one late evening as she peeled off the tattered wallpaper in the dim light of her new home. The air was thick with dust and a sense of something unnameable. She thought back to her kids, Emily and Jake, safe in their rooms, laughter still echoing through the house, but it felt too quiet now. A chill draped over her, more a warning than a random draft. This house was charming, yet there was something unsettling about its history, especially that eerie basement. She'd heard the whispers around the neighborhood, the family that vanished 5 years ago without a trace. Flickering lights and strange noises had become ordinary sights and sounds during her late-night shifts as a waitress, but the idea of her children playing unknowingly close to the horrors below twisted her gut into knots. Just yesterday, Emily had excitedly grabbed her crayons, her little fingers fluttering across paper, drawing ominous shapes that made Sarah break into a cold sweat. "Look, Mommy! The man in the shadows wants to play." Shivers ran down Sarah's spine. As the kids ventured into the overgrown backyard, she could feel the walls closing in. The neighbors used to smile, but now they passed by with their heads down, whispering about the cursed house, a dark secret that wrapped like chains around her sanity. Were they simply gossiping, or was she stepping into a trap laid by grief-stricken families? Just as the whispers outside her door grew louder, Sarah dismissed her fear, clinging to the hope that this was a fresh start after years of hardship. But the deeper she delved into the home's history, the darker it got. One evening, she reported the odd occurrences, flickering lights and strange sounds, only to have the local police chuckle dismissively. "It's an old house, Ma'am, just like you." Nothing could prepare her for what awaited her that night, or for what her children might uncover about their new home. With every fiber of her being, Sarah pressed on, trying to convince herself she was letting stress get the better of her. Yet, creeping doubt clung to her like a heavy mist. Kids were supposed to draw rainbows, not weird shapes that stared at her from the dark. The turning point came when Emily tugged on her sleeve one dreary evening. "Mommy," she whispered, her big innocent blue eyes boring into Sarah's soul. "The man wants me to come downstairs." Instinctively, Sarah felt cold sweat break out on her forehead. "What man, sweetheart?" Before she could gather her thoughts, the neighbors were chatting again, a hushed conversation about a curse, a figure who seemed benevolent but was anything but. Her heart raced as the words echoed in her mind, a dark connection lingering in the depths of that ominous basement. What might that mean for her children? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night was the tipping point. Every creak of the house felt like echoes of terror surrounding her. Sarah could no longer deny the fear clutching at her heart. Was it her imagination? Or was there something truly sinister lurking below? Resolute, she decided to confront her fears. Descending the stairs, she was engulfed by the thick, suffocating darkness where small glimmers of light could only come from her flashlight. As the beam illuminated the basement, horror gripped her. Disturbing remnants lay scattered around, a child's beloved teddy bear and messages smeared on the walls spoke of untold suffering. And then she heard it, soft laughter, not her children's. Something darker washed over her. She turned to rush back upstairs, but the shadows seemed to coil around her and a spine-chilling whisper called her name. Sarah. The laughter morphed into something menacing just as the window above slammed shut with a deafening crash. She was not alone, and then, she realized other eyes were watching from the dark as she stumbled forward, fear entwined with a simple, dreadful thought. What awaited her in those shadows? Sarah's breath hitched as the whisper echoed in her ears. It felt alive, wrapping around her mind like tendrils of smoke. The darkness pressed in closer, and she could sense the pulse of something ancient lurking nearby. Panic bubbled inside her, clawing at her throat as she willed herself to move. "Mommy!" Jake's distant voice broke her trance. She felt her heart leap with desperation. Her children were in danger, just beyond her reach. The shadowy tendrils loosened their grip, but she knew they were waiting, watching. "Stay upstairs!" she shouted, though every ragged breath felt like a betrayal of her own fear. She was a mother, and she had to protect her kids, even if it meant facing the very thing that had already seeped into her dreams. The basement seemed to come alive, the walls vibrating with a low hum that resonated deep within her bones. She steadied her flashlight, its beam wavering, flickering like her resolve. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a thick silence that felt heavy and saturated with dread. It was as if the darkness anticipated her every thought. With each step she took, the air became denser, suffocating. She strained to listen, willing the distance to her children to close. Each creak of the old floorboards felt like a countdown, the seconds drawing out, echoing in her ears. 1, 2. A sudden, rough movement to her right shattered the stillness. Sarah whipped around, her heart hammering like a drum. Shadows danced across the walls, shifting violently as if something unseen was just out of reach. "Who's there?" she called, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. Her stomach twisted, filled with raw dread. There was no answer, just that unsettling silence. But a moment later, she caught a flicker of movement, a dark shape slinking just beyond her vision. Instinctively, she turned back to the staircase, but the path blurred as shadows stretched toward her like fingers, reaching for her legs. She felt trapped, the terror radiating off those walls, cornering her like prey. Sarah forced herself to breathe slowly, trying to calm the storm inside her. She thought of Emily and Jake, their innocent laughter, a memory now intertwined with a sinister overcoat of paranoia. Suddenly, a shriek cut through the basement. It was high-pitched and agonized, it echoed from Emily's bedroom. Something had crossed the threshold from her dreams into reality, and it felt like a warning, a demand for attention. Heart racing anew, she sprinted back upstairs, her breaths shallow and quick. The basement seemed to mock her departure, the laughter slowly returning to a sinister hum. Shadows chased her, darting at her heels, but she forced herself to keep moving. "Emily, Jake!" Sarah shouted, her voice barely above a whisper as she reached the landing. Panic welled as dread chained her feet to the floor. She flung the door open, stepping into the corridor. The children's room lay at the end, the door ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning. A sickening feeling gripped her as she advanced, every fiber in her body screaming that something was wrong, deeply wrong. As she peered into the room, her heart sank. Emily stood in the center, her head tilted, eyes fixed on something only she could see. Next to her, Jake clutched his toy dinosaur, trembling. "Mommy, we were just playing." Emily's voice came soft, almost dreamy. "Playing?" Sarah echoed, her words barely a breath. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, the crash echoing off the walls like thunder. Darkness engulfed them, and Sarah's stomach dropped. She couldn't breathe, the children's giggles morphing into cackles filled with malice. With a surge of adrenaline, she lunged toward her children, but as she reached for them, the laughter crescendoed into a cacophony, drowning her out completely. "What have you brought with you, Sarah?" A voice deeper than the void whispered from the shadows, mingling with the shrieks of her children. The basement wasn't just a place. It was a gateway. And now, each ghostly presence yearned to cross the threshold into the living. As the darkness pressed closer, Sarah's thoughts raced. Was there a way out? Or had she willingly played into its twisted game? With her heart pounding in her ears, she braced herself for what was coming next. Sarah's heart raced as darkness wrapped around her like a suffocating shroud. Fear surged through her limbs, turning them to lead as she stood frozen. The laughter of her children was no longer innocent, twisted and distorted, it echoed in her ears, rising and falling like a tide of ghosts. Emily! Jake! She shouted again, fighting against the paralyzing grip of despair. She took a step forward, determined to pull her children away from whatever malevolent force had seized them. As she pushed against the door, something cold brushed against her skin. It snaked around her ankle, pulling her back hard. She screamed, fighting to break free, her nails clawing at the floor for purchase. No! Let go of me! The darkness laughed louder, it sounded a cruel symphony conducted by unseen hands. Mommy! Jake's voice was a thin wail, barely breaking through the chaos. But now he didn't sound right, like a puppet whose strings had been pulled askew. No! Sarah cried out. She was drowning in shadows, the walls around her pulsing as if alive. She could feel the sinister whispering intensifying, wrapping around her thoughts and squeezing. Stay away from them! She screamed, summoning every ounce of willpower. She felt a surge of warmth in her chest, fueled by the fierce love for her children. With a sudden rush, the grip on her ankle loosened. Sarah seized the moment, throwing herself towards her children. The air crackled with energy, as if a storm was brewing. Emily! Jake! Their faces turned towards her, eyes wide and glassy, pupils dilated like black holes ready to swallow the light. She reached out, her fingers brushing against Emily's cheek. It's me. I'm here. Wake up. A shift rippled through the air. Time seemed to warp, twisting into a cacophony of whispers that spilled from every corner. They're ours now, the voice coiled around her in a sinister hiss. Get away from them. With a frenzied scream, Sarah lunged, grabbing her children and pulling them into her arms. In that moment, her thoughts crystallized. She had to protect them, no matter the cost. The darkness around them pulsed violently in response. Shadows flared up, reaching out like desperate hands rippling against her skin. The air was thick now, suffused with an overpowering sense of dread. The laughter turned to howls, shrieks of frustration echoing in the room. Mommy, what's happening? Jake whimpered, clinging tightly to her. His tiny fingers were icy cold, a stark contrast to the hellish heat that surrounded them. I don't know. Just hold on. She cried, her voice breaking. It was a battle of wills, light against insatiable dark, the monstrous force behind her wanting what was impossibly innocent. Using the last vestiges of her strength, Sarah turned, dragging her children toward the door. The laughter morphed into screaming as shadows stretched unnaturally, clawing at her with ravenous intent. The door had shifted but not closed completely. It felt like the only escape, a flicker of hope against the oppressive dark. We must reach the light. Just as she reached for the door handle, the shadows surged, blocking it like a wall of fog. Sarah felt her chest tightening, the darkness swirling around her as she kicked the door. Get out! She shouted, desperation edging into hysteria. A moment of stillness filled the air. Then, the door creaked ominously, an echo of dread that reverberated through her bones. She thrust it open, dragging her children behind her, adrenaline bursting to life. Would they make it? Or were they too late, forever trapped in a realm of madness? The light beyond the door beckoned, but so did the shadows. Sarah felt their claws scratching at her sanity, plucking at the edges of her resolve. Stepping through, she felt an intense pull as the shadows writhed behind her, vengeful whispers threatening to reclaim what she had snatched from their grasp. You can't escape us. They hissed, burrowing into her psyche. As the door slammed shut behind them, the echo rattled her bones. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Are we safe? Emily whispered, her small voice trembling with fear. I don't know, Sarah replied, dread weighing heavily in her heart. The aftermath of their narrow escape lingered in the air, a sense of foreboding crawling up her spine. Could they truly escape the terror of what lay beyond the threshold? And if they had left the dark behind, would it track them down where light seemed to shine? As they stood in the silence, the walls began to hum again, a wicked rhythm echoing a promise of return. The air outside felt almost false, too calm after the chaos that had consumed them. Sarah turned around, her back to the door they had just burst through, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Emily and Jake clung to her, eyes wide, their small bodies shaking with the remnants of fear that coursed through the air like a chilling wind. "What now, Mommy?" Jake asked, his voice small and quivering. We need to find a safe place," Sarah stammered, her mind racing. But the landscape around them felt wrong, the colors drained as if a painter had forgotten the cardinal hues. A sense of stillness enveloped them, punctuated by the unsettling hum of the walls. As she stepped further away from the door, the humming grew louder, vibrating in her chest. It was a hypnotic lullaby, beckoning them to come closer. "Don't," she whispered, her heart pounding dangerously. "It's a trick." Holding her children tighter, she scanned the area around them. The path ahead, lined with trees that twisted grotesquely under the weight of their own shadows, seemed to close in, each gnarled branch like fingers eager to grasp anyone who dared venture too close. "Mommy." Emily's voice pierced through the tension, pulling Sarah's gaze downward. The little girl was pointing toward the ground. There, stuck beneath loose soil and decaying leaves, were toys hers and Jake's scattered like remnants of some long-forgotten game. They were toys she had carefully packed away, believing they were safe, part of their past buried in happier memories. How did they get here?" Sarah's voice trembled, a new wave of dread washing over her. "I don't like it here." Jake's eyes darted to the trees, as if they could spring to life at any moment. "No one asked you to like it," a voice hissed from the ever-thickening shadow around them. It wasn't just the whisper, it was an echo of 1,000 wicked thoughts, a malignancy that seeped into her mind. "Let us keep moving," Sarah urged as the trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches almost crawling like dark tendrils toward her. She forced her feet to move, pulling her children along, but the trees loomed larger, the ground underfoot growing more uneven, as if it was alive and resisting their escape. Suddenly, she heard a laugh not from her children, but from deep within the forest. It was the same twisted laughter that had haunted her moments before. "Join us. Join the game." A chill ran through her, electrifying her senses. "We're not playing," Sarah shouted defiantly. "Get away from my kids." The shadows thickened, swirling around them like a storm, and with each step they took, it felt as if they were being drawn deeper into a trap. The toys continued to appear beneath their feet, old dolls with cracked porcelain faces and action figures whose eyes seemed to follow their every movement. As they walked, the path itself began to change. The world was shifting, distortions weaving into their surroundings. The shadows were not just remnants of darkness, they were alive, waiting, watching. "Mommy." Emily tugged at her sleeve, pointing at a figure that emerged from the gloom, a faint outline that morphed into something familiar yet repulsive. "Look." It was her Sarah standing there, lifeless and pale, a mirror image with hollow eyes searching for something within her. "What is this?" Sarah gasped, adrenaline surging through her, but a cold, heavy dread smothered it. "It's not real." "Real or not, you have to choose," her doppelganger called, voice layered with echoes of 1,000 lost souls. "Lose yourself or lose them." Panic rose as Sarah stared into the abyss of her own reflection, the ground shifting beneath them like syrup. "We need to go," she screamed, grabbing Emily and Jake once more, her heart racing, as the trees closed in, their shadows cloaking them in suffocating darkness. But as they broke into a desperate run, the sound of laughter chased after them. Would they find their way back, or was this fate sealed in the creeping shadows that pursued them? "Mommy. What's happening?" Jake screamed, the terror in his voice igniting a primal fear in Sarah. The echoes danced around them as they barreled onwards, and through the darkness, the reflection whispered, "You'll never escape what you truly are." The ground trembled, and as they plunged deeper into the sinister forest, the shadows laughed with a chilling certainty that sent a chill through her spine. What did it mean to lose themselves? And what awaited them in the depths of that darkened wood? The wind tore through the trees, howling like a wounded beast as Sarah pushed herself and her children further into the depths of the forest. They had no choice. The path behind them was now a wall of darkness, the laughter receding like a tide only to rise again with scarier intensity. "Mommy, please," Jake's voice cracked, pulling at her heartstrings. Sarah glanced down at his pale face, the shadows threatening to swallow him whole. "We're almost there." She shouted more for herself than him, her voice strained as she forced her legs to keep moving. The trees were changing their form, stretching farther into the sky, creating a canopy that seemed to pulse with a threatening life of its own. Vines writhed at their feet, coiling like snakes eager to ensnare them. The ground was no longer stable, shifting underfoot, making every step a gamble. "Mommy!" Emily screamed again, this time more urgent. Sarah turned, just in time to see her daughter point toward a clearing ahead, where the trees parted as if performing a dark ritual. "Stay close." They stumbled into the clearing, and just for a moment, it felt like a refuge. Light broke through the thick canopy above, illuminating a small pond surrounded by twisted roots. But the scent of decay was thick in the air, and the water looked like a pool of ink, swirling and uninterpretable. "Mommy, there's something in the water!" Jake cried, eyes wide with terror. Before Sarah could respond, a hand shot up from the depths, a skeletal hand breaking through the surface, grasping for air, dragging a figure weeping silently into view. "No!" Sarah shrieked, stepping backward, the reality of what they were seeing clawing at her sanity. The face rose up from the water, and she almost turned to run, but something forced her to stay. The face was contorted with grief, tortured eyes searching, pleading. It was a woman, her features hauntingly familiar, yet distorted by despair. The resemblance was striking. This was another version of herself, laced in shadows and suffering. "Help me," the figure rasped, her voice echoing with 1,000 voices, mingling with the trees that began to murmur in response. "Find the truth before it finds you, Emily, Jake, run!" Sarah screamed, panic flooding her as she snatched her children, dragging them away from the pond's edge. The waters churned violently, shadows rippling beneath the surface, and the branches above twisted like angry serpents. As they stumbled back into the dense woods, she could feel the shadows rise again, hunger twisting their forms. Laughter echoed around them, but it was a different tone now, more sinister, imbued with malice. "Join us, Sarah!" The shadows crooned, weaving their words into a hypnotic chant. "Join the game!" "No, no!" She gasped, darkness swirling around her like a storm, a deafening cacophony drowning out all thought. Something cold brushed against her leg, she nearly tripped, fear clawing at her throat. What was this place? "Mommy! Help!" Emily shrieked, a new cry piercing through echoes of the darkness. Sarah turned, heart pounding, to see the light flickering ahead, a wisp of hope against the enveloping void. "Over there!" Sarah yelled, thrusting her fear down as she pulled her children toward that distant glow. But as they sprinted forward, the laughter morphed into shrieks, the shadows clawing at the kids' ankles, trying to pull them back. "Run! Don't look back!" She screamed, adrenaline surging through her, desperate to escape their clutches. Just as they reached the light, Sarah felt an icy grip on her arm. She spun, meeting a face that wasn't hers, eyes wide with terror. It was her own doppelganger again, twisted in agony, lips moving silently as hopelessness filled the space between them. "Too late," it whispered, the sound blending with the laughter surrounding them, creating a discordant symphony of despair. With a final surge of strength, Sarah broke free, dragging her children through the light. But behind them, the shadows surged, swallowed her reflection whole, and for one dark moment, Sarah felt the pull of what she could have become. The light flickered, something waiting on the other side. As they crossed into the brightness, Sarah's heart raced faster than her feet. What had they escaped? What waited in the light? But the laughter followed, a haunting reminder that the darkness was never far behind. What would the light reveal? Would it lead them to safety, or deeper into the nightmares? The moment they crossed into the light, a wave of heat enveloped them. It was a stark contrast to the chilling darkness they'd escaped, yet the warmth felt wrong-tainted, suffocating. Their breaths came in quick gasps, filling their lungs with stale air that smelled of mildew and something sweetly rotting. "Where are we?" Jake whimpered, glancing around nervously as the trees began to tremble, leaving the sense of safety fragile and fleeting. They stood at the edge of a new clearing, the remnants of a dilapidated cabin looming before them, swallowed by twisting vines and thick greenery that seemed alive, pulsing with malice. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, her heart pounding like a drum. She inched towards the cabin, the stench of decay intensifying with each step. The door hung ajar, creaking softly in the breeze, inviting yet ominous. "Mommy." Emily's voice quivered, pulling at Sarah's resolve. Looking down, her daughter's wide eyes spoke of terror. "All right, we need to see if someone is inside. They could help us." But deep down, a dread blossomed. Something felt off, an invisible weight pressed against her chest. As they approached the entrance, the laughter echoed again, bouncing off the cabin walls, twisted and mocking. "Find the truth. Find the truth," it slithered into her thoughts, seductive like a siren's call. "Come on," Sarah urged, dragging her children closer, the threshold looming like a hungry mouth. She took a breath, steeling herself, and pushed the door with shaking hands. It swung open, revealing a small, dark space inside. The remnants of once functional furniture lay scattered, shadows draped thickly over everything. "Mommy, I don't like it here." Jake's voice cracked. "Neither do I," she said softly, eyeing the corners where shadows danced as though living. She stepped inside, a step into the unknown. The floor creaked ominously beneath her feet, the wooden boards rotting away, barely holding together. Dust motes floated like 1,000 tiny ghosts, disturbed by their presence. Yet the cabin seemed to breathe, exhaling whispers laced with longing and despair. "Look!" Emily shouted, pointing at a trunk pushed against the far wall, its surface marred by time and neglect. Something inside called to Sarah, an echo of the woman from the pond swallowing her thoughts. "Let's check it out," Sarah suggested while suppressing her unease. She approached the trunk, the whispers growing louder, the shadows creeping closer, curling like fingers ready to snatch them away. She knelt, brushing her fingers across the cold, rusted latch. "What if there is something inside we need?" The words spilled from her lips, though she felt her heart race dangerously with doubt. With a deep breath, Sarah opened the trunk. The lid squeaked like a ghost protesting its release. Inside lay a collection of objects, an old photograph, a frayed child's toy, and a diary with a weathered cover, the pages yellowed and stained. The diary stirred something in her, a pulse of pain radiating from her chest, drawing her eyes to the photographs. She felt a flicker of recognition. One picture showed a group of smiling children, and one was familiar, eerily. "Who are they, Mommy?" Emily peered over her shoulder. I don't know," Sarah stammered. But her instinct screamed. The face, the dark locks, the same eyes, how could this be? Was this another version of her family? "Turn the pages," Jake urged, breathless. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the diary, and as she read, the words burned into her mind, tales of others who had entered the woods, entangled in darkness, forever lost. Brow furrowed, the last entry caught her. "I fear the shadows, for they have eyes, and they will come for you suddenly." A loud bang erupted from the door, rattling the frame as if something or someone was trying to break in. The shadows shifted, writhing beneath the trunk, squirming like snakes. Panic bubbled within Sarah, her breath shallow, each heartbeat a drum signaling their impending doom. "Mommy!" Emily screamed, running back towards the door. Just as Sarah turned to follow, she saw her doppelganger in the cabin's darkest corner, eyes wide and pleading. "You must escape. They want your children. Sarah's heart raced. Could the shadows see? Could they hear? The thick air surged, pressing against her back as she fought to remember what drew her here. We need to get out. Now. What would happen if they couldn't? She grabbed her children, ready to bolt. But the cabin groaned like a living thing, and chilling laughter echoed once more, circling around them. Join us, Sarah. Join the game. Would she be strong enough to break the cycle? With terror overtaking reason, Sarah crashed into the door, her children clinging tightly, her heart pounding with each unsteady step into the unknown. But just behind them, the shadows surged, and she heard the whispers grow louder, more insistent. Join us. As they burst outside, the ground shifted again. The laughter melded into frustrated screams, and then silence. But something was waiting in the forest, lurking just beyond view, waiting to see if Sarah would return. It promised nightmares yet unseen. What awaited them on the other side? Would the shadows finally claim her family? Outside, the air was thick with tension, the world alive with an eerie stillness. Sarah's heart raced as she clutched both of her children tightly against her side. She scanned the tree line, every shadow a potential threat, every rustle a whisper of dread. We need to move, she urged, trying to sound steady. Stay close. Don't look back. But Emily stared into the depths of the cabin, eyes wide. The lady, she said, don't listen. Sarah snapped, cutting her daughter off, the desperation creeping into her voice. They stumbled back into the thick underbrush, branches clawing at their arms. The shadows that had been so menacing before now seemed to shift and sway rhythmically, as if calling them back. Mommy, please. Jake's fear was palpable, his small hand clutching onto her skirts as they dashed deeper into the woods, away from the cabin's horror. Keep going. She shouted, pushing through the tangled vines that ensnared their path. The ground was uneven, roots snaking out like grasping fingers, eager to trip them, to pull them down into the loamy darkness. Suddenly, the laughter returned, now enveloping them, wrapping around their heads like a suffocating blanket. Join us. It beckoned, a wicked symphony of voices, intimate yet foreign, dancing on the edge of sanity. Emily clutched her ears, her eyes watering. Make it stop. Make it stop. She looked up at her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm trying. I'm trying. Sarah felt the weight of despair settle in her stomach. She fought against the urge to scream, to succumb to the insanity lurking beneath the boughs. Every instinct terrified her, and she could sense the shadows swirling behind them, hungry and looming. Then, as if conjured by their fear, a shadowy figure emerged between the trees, a tall, gaunt specter, stretching high above the darkness. You cannot escape, Sarah. It howled, voice rumbling like thunder, echoing in the chambers of her mind. Its face was featureless, a void that absorbed the surrounding light, a grotesque parody of what she once thought was human. Run! She shouted, propelling her children ahead. They slipped past the figure, but it turned its gaze towards them, and with it came a wave of icy fear that sent chills rippling through her spine. A fire ignited in Sarah, motherhood overpowering the creeping dread. She wouldn't let it claim her children. Look for the road. She shouted, desperately scanning the area, feeling the deceptive foliage close in on them. We need to get to the road. But the more they ran, the more disoriented they became. Trees morphed into menacing shapes, and the laughter grew louder, ringing in her ears. They were lost, and every step felt heavier, every breath just a little harder to take. Just then, Jake's voice pierced through the chaos. Mom! The shadow! It's right behind me. Sarah whipped around. The figure loomed closer, its elongated fingers reaching for Jake, clutching like claws. Leave him be. She shouted, stepping between her son and the darkness, feeling her heart pulse with raw defiance. Join us, it hissed, and Sarah felt a darkness within herself stir, a pull toward despair so profound it sent her reeling. She gripped her children's hands tighter, grounding herself in the certainty of their presence. "What could the thing want with us?" Emily yelled, her voice breaking. Sarah looked deep into her daughter's frightened eyes. "It feeds on fear. If we just keep moving." But could she keep that promise? She started running again, pulling her children in a wild sprint, praying for a break in the trees, praying for salvation. Yet, a fork in the path appeared ahead, two routes twisting like serpents. "Which way, Mommy?" Jake panted, looking up, wide-eyed with exhaustion and terror. "Left," she yelled, with no justification, only the instinct of a mother trying to outrun the shadows. They bolted into the left path, but the whispering laughter danced behind them, taunting. It only seemed to grow closer, as if the shadows experienced delight in their chaos. Sarah could hear her heart pounding louder than any footsteps. Each pulse echoed against her ribs, a desperate drumbeat of survival. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of white, a moonbeam slashing through the clouds. The trees began to thin, and hope surged in her chest. But the shadows thickened around the children, and with every frantic step, they seemed to close in, smothering all light. "Mommy!" Emily cried, falling behind as the shadows snagged at her feet with malicious intent. "Ellie!" Joining the sounds of distress, Sarah turned, only to find the trees behind her blending into a solid wall, cutting off any escape. With adrenaline coursing through her, she lunged back, desperately reaching for Emily as they became engulfed in darkness. "Grab my hand." As she clasped her daughter's fingers, a flicker of light appeared ahead, almost like a beacon. "This way." They burst forth into a small clearing, the moonlight illuminating their frantic faces. But the shadow behind them warped, stretching across the ground, gathering power, desperate not to be left behind. "We're not safe yet," Sarah whispered, the knot of fear tightening in her throat. But then, a voice, softer now, floated through the air as if beckoning them to surrender. "Join us." Caught between the darkness and the light, Sarah stood frozen, her mind racing with uncertainty. Would they ever escape? Or would the shadows finally claim them? Fear coiled tightly in her chest, fraying her will, as she heard the faint laughter returning, echoing off the unseen walls of their nightmare. What would it take to silence it forever? The only choice left would lead them further into the unknown. In the flickering light of the moon, they stood on the edge of the abyss, a choice still to be made. What waited in that choice was enough to freeze the blood of even the bravest soul. Would it take one final step into darkness to unravel the truth? The shadows danced around them, snaking along the ground like living entities, each whispering sweet promises that tugged at Sarah's resolve. "You could be safe if you just listen," the shadows coaxed, a sinister lull echoing in her mind. The trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches twisting like fingers reaching out, threatening to snatch them back into the unseen horrors. "Mommy, I can't breathe." Jake gasped, his small form trembling beside her. "Just stay close," Sarah cried, her voice breaking as she fought against a wave of despair. She could sense the darkness breathing behind them, a now happy presence reveling in their panic as they huddled together, desperate for protection in the pitch-black night. Stumbling forward, she squinted into the gloom, a half-formed plan weaving through her mind. "We have to find the road." It was her only tether to hope. Each step was a fight against the shifting ground, the roots weaving tighter around their ankles like the fangs of a great beast. "Mommy, what if we never find it?" Emily's voice trembled, a quiet ache that dug into the pit of Sarah's stomach. "No," Sarah snapped, gritting her teeth. "We'll find it. We will." But even she heard the uncertainty echoing in her own words. Then, right on cue, the air turned cold, and the laughter, the familiar, haunting laughter, rose around them, a cacophony of voices blending and churning like a storm. Join us," they called, their melodic tones dripping with malice, seeking to draw them into the endless depths of despair. Fighting back the bile rising in her throat, she pressed forward. Yet, with every step, the trees twisted and morphed, the path ahead meshing into a tangle of branches. Vague memories flashed in her mind, stories of lost travelers who wandered too far into the woods, never to return. Was that to be their fate? "Mommy!" Jake cried suddenly, his voice piercing through the fog of fear. "What's that?" Sarah turned sharply, her heart racing, the shadows shifting as if preparing to pounce. A glint of something metallic caught her eye among the underbrush, a fence, rusted and gnarled, blocking their path. How had they not seen it before? "What if we follow it?" Emily suggested, her voice almost hopeful. "Maybe it leads to the road?" With no time to weigh the options, Sarah nodded, gripping her children's hands tighter. They made their way toward the fence, but the laughter escalated, swirling around them like a furious wind. "You can't escape," it taunted, echoing from every angle. As they huddled against the rusting barrier, Sarah felt a deep, unsettling chill seep into her bones. The fence, covered in thorns, seemed to pulse in the faint light of the moon. It was almost alive, exuding an energy that beckoned her to stay. "Stay with us, don't leave, no!" she yelled, a fierce determination igniting in her chest. "We will not stay. Not today." Taking a deep breath, she pushed forward, tugging Jake and Emily along, their tiny feet stumbling over the uneven ground. Yet, the laughter intensified, the shadows coiling closer, eager to snatch them back, to close the distance. Behind them, the shadow figure twisted into sight again, its ghastly face completely devoid of features, only a vast emptiness that seemed to consume the very air around them. "You cannot escape, Sarah. You are mine." Panic flooded her senses, an animal instinct kicking in as she turned back toward the path. Her eyes darted up and down, scanning for a way out. Suddenly, a figure emerged at the edge of the clearing, cloaked in a veil of shimmering light. It seemed ethereal, almost comforting, a ghostly apparition of hope. "Here. This way." It beckoned, voice melodic and soothing. "Mommy." Jake whispered, eyes wide, torn between trust and fear. "Stay with me." Sarah shouted as she pushed towards the figure. They had to decide now, had to break free of the shadows grasping at their heels. Would they run toward a possible savior, or stay and face the darkness? They took one step forward, then another, when the ground suddenly shuddered beneath them as if the earth itself was protesting their advance. The shadows roared, erupting into a cacophony of growls, snatches of laughter echoing through the woods, shaking Sarah to her core. In that moment, time seemed suspended, the world drawing in a breath, as all cathartic screams merged into one haunting note. Sarah realized, it was now or never. The final choice lay heavy in the air, and with it, the truth awaited to unravel, lurking just beneath the surface of their fears. Would they take that leap into the unknown, or would the shadows pull them into their eternal grasp? With desperation igniting her heart, Sarah's next choice could change everything. What lay beyond the veil of the light? Was it salvation, or an even greater darkness? The figure glimmered, drawing them closer with its soft glow, but Sarah felt a nagging doubt, a pull from within that urged her to curl up and hide in the shadows instead. "We can't trust it," she thought, raking her nails against the bark of a nearby tree, the chill of fear melting into manic desperation. "What if it's part of the darkness?" "Go!" Jake cried, his voice high and panicked, his small hands grasping Sarah's arm tightly. "No!" she shouted once again, her voice husky. She felt the shadows swirling, wrapping around them like a thick fog that smothered even the distant hope emanating from the figure. The shadows were growing bolder, lunging toward them with eager whispers and promises, each word an echo of dread. "Mommy, please." Emily's voice was trembling, festering doubt creeping into her innocence as she shrank against Sarah. But just as the shadows lunged, a pulse of energy from the figure seemed to repel them momentarily. A shimmer spread outward like ripples in water, forcing the shadows back for an instant. "You can't be afraid," the figure sang softly, their voice wrapping around the children like a warm blanket. I can take you away from this place if only you choose to follow. The air thickened with tense anticipation. Sarah's heart beat wildly, caught in a storm of indecision. Should they risk everything on this flickering light? Trust was a luxury she could not afford, yet, something in the figure's gentle motion felt achingly familiar. Mommy. Jake tugged at her hand again, his fear palpable. What do we do? Before Sarah could answer, the shadows reformed, growing denser, swarming like hungry wolves sizing up their prey. The laughter blended with whispers now, a haunting chorus that curled into their ears, screaming, "You are ours, Sarah. You cannot escape forever." With shaking legs, she threw her weight against the fence. "We will find our way," she shouted into the bleakness, her voice cracking. She could feel every instinct urging her to flee, to turn away from the light and return into the suffocating darkness. The figure spoke again, its voice trailing like a soft breeze, "Don't look back." With a final lingering glance, Sarah tore her eyes from the shadows. She searched the figure's face, desperately needing assurance. There was something in those luminous eyes that flickered, a depth of sorrow and promise mingled. Maybe it was salvation. Maybe it was simply her will bending under pressure. Then, swiftly, as if answering her silent prayer, the figure extended a shimmering hand. "This way." It beckoned again, and this time with a faint but firm grip on faith, Sarah urged Emily and Jake to follow her toward the light. They barreled ahead, the thorns of the fence clawing at them as they passed. "Don't stop. Keep going." The shadows lunged again, clawing like tendrils, reaching for them, cold and insatiable. The darkness howled in fury, and the toll of fear struck at Sarah's heart with every thundering thump. Yet, they pushed forward, guided by the glowing pulse of that ethereal figure. Each step was like a heartbeat, hitting harder with every inch they gained. But just as hope sparked brighter than a midnight sun, the ground rolled underfoot. An unsettling sigh rumbled through the earth, echoing in depths not meant to be disturbed. The forest shivered. Shadows twisted and contorted, snarling their discontent as thick vines shot out from the ground, wrapping around Sarah's ankles, dragging her back. "Mommy!" Jake screamed, wild and desperate. "Hold on!" Sarah yelled, fighting against the roots trying to swallow her whole. The light flickered like a dying candle, nerve-wracking and dimming. "We have to go." A roar filled the air, a sound that felt both ancient and primal. The very shadows of the forest now shuddered with rage, turning towards the children, eyes wide with ancient hunger. Where they had been merely spectators, now they coiled closer, tightening their grip, threatening to claim Sarah's fear as their own. "No!" Sarah bellowed, summoning every ounce of her will. Would they falter now? Would they drown in darkness? Where nothing but despair awaited? With a heave, she twisted, calling for her children, "Run! Follow the light!" But just ahead, the figure began to dissolve, shimmering threads unraveling into the air as its presence faded into a cloud of silvery mist. The darkness had drawn it in, an insatiable tempter taking even hope for itself. "Mommy!" Emily shrieked, overwhelmed. As the last remnants of the light scattered like ashes in the tempest, Sarah's world blurred. She had to choose, but the ground beneath and the shadows around were spinning into chaos. In that moment, as despair thickened and shadows loomed large, Sarah's heart ice-cold with the chilling truth, one nagging thought remained: would she embrace the dark, or fight until the end? As the shadows surged, a final question echoed ominously through the forest: what if safety was never meant to be found? Sarah stood on the precipice of despair, tangled in shadows that writhed like living nightmares. Each pulse of darkness was a reminder of what they risked losing. Each quickening heartbeat echoed the terror that clawed at her mind. The figure before her was fading, and with it, the last flicker of hope shimmered like a candle snuffed out by the storm. "We have to go!" she yelled again, her voice breaking. Panic twisted in her stomach as the shadows lashed out, cold tendrils wrapping around her ankles, holding her back. "Mommy!" Jake cried, his small voice filled with urgency. Instinct kicked hard, she couldn't falter. She'd gone too far and fought too hard for her children to be swept away now. "Grab my hand!" she screamed, yanking them together and breaking free. They tumbled toward the shadowy edges of the forest, the light flickering and pulsing behind them like a heartbeat drowning in terror. But the darkness danced menacingly, and the laughter echoed, sinister and knowing, wrapping around them like a shroud. "You are ours. You belong to us," it taunted. "Not today," Sarah roared, pushing through her fear like a battering ram. She could feel instinct kicking in, a primal need to protect that rose fully in her chest, burning hotter than any shadow could snuff out. They fled, scrambling past gnarled roots and desperate shadows until the last of the light flickered dimly in the distance. "No! Not the light!" Sarah shouted, fighting back against the urge to run towards it. She wouldn't do that again. The memory of the grip it had on her heart made her shudder. "Follow me," she called as she channeled every ounce of courage into her next move. She turned away from the fading light and raced deeper into the woods. The shadows roared, slamming against unseen barriers, clawing at the air with relentless rage. Sarah glanced back, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the figure, a last shred of the ethereal figure grasping at the edges of her vision. "We're coming!" she screamed, hoping beyond hope it could somehow follow. But it was just an illusion. The shadows surged forward, hungry and relentless. "Why won't they give up?" Emily pleaded, her little hands clutching tightly against Sarah's arm. "Because they don't know what they're missing. We'll find a way," Sarah shouted as she pushed through a thicket of branches and emerged into a clearing. The clearing was bright, the moonlight spilling down like a river of silver, illuminating their path ahead, a direct path leading up the slope toward the road visible just beyond the trees. "Look! The road!" Jake pointed, his voice rising like a buoy in a stormy sea. "Run!" Sarah commanded, adrenaline surging through her veins with each step. But as they dashed forward, Sarah felt the darkness closing in around them again, shapes materializing from the depths, stretching and reaching, desperate to reclaim them. The thought of losing Jake and Emily sent a fierce wave of strength through her. "We won't be afraid," she cried out, pulling her children to her side. "Together, we are stronger than this." As they climbed toward the light, she could feel the shadows flailing at her back, their whispers growing frantic, conflicted. "Join us. Join the game. You cannot escape." The air vibrated with their desperate pleas, and for a moment, Sarah's resolve wavered under their weight. Then, she remembered the twinkle of laughter, the innocent joy of her children's play, pushing back against the suffocating grip of despair. "Don't look back," she urged, tightening her hold on them as she led them toward the road. "We just need to reach the edge." Each stride propelled them forward, nearer to freedom as their heavy breaths painted clouds in the cool night air. The final steps felt like an eternity, the ground beneath their feet trembling with the chaos behind them. The shadows screamed deep, soul-wrenching cries that rattled her bones. Just ahead, they reached the road, laid out like a promise under the moonlight, fragile, but beckoning. With one last push, Sarah pulled her children to the edge, stumbling into the open air. As they crossed the threshold, the shadows hissed and recoiled, their insatiable hunger no match for the light. With a final surge of adrenaline, Sarah turned to watch as the shadows rushed against an invisible wall, screeches echoing in the night, their malice still swirling, unable to reach them. "What happened?" Jake gasped, his chest heaving, eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't know," Sarah breathed, heart racing, but she could feel it, the dark shroud lifting. They were free, somehow. They had escaped. "Can we go home?" Emily asked softly, her small hand clasping Sarah's tight. "Let us go home," Sarah whispered, tears of relief mixing with their adrenaline. As they turned away from the darkness, the forest stood quiet behind them, its secrets still bubbling beneath the surface, waiting and watching. But for Sarah, Jake, and Emily, the sunlight that waited beyond the horizon lit a path toward hope, leaving fear to the shadows of the past where it belonged. With each step forward, they embraced the dawn that promised a new beginning. The echoes of laughter still lingered, but now they were joined by the hopeful sounds of life, a reminder that even in darkness, light could still emerge. And in that moment, Sarah understood, survival wasn't just about escaping hell's grasp. It was about carrying the ones we love, igniting the flame of hope that would guide them home together, forever. Now, if you're reading this, here's what I need you to do. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss out on our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to help spread the word and feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and reactions. What did you think of this wild ride? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is what keeps this channel alive.